wanna see a dead body? Instrumentals from my mama's Christmas party. Troubles on my mind. I still smell crime. My little brother crying. Smokers repeatedly blind. My Sega Genesis.
Welcome to the What? My name's Eric Page, and thank you guys for tuning in. Whether you're listening, whether you're watching, however you're consuming this, I just want to thank each and every one of you for just coming to hear me talk, because this is what this show is really about. Just me talking about the things that I'm interested in, which is usually music, movies, whatever topics I'm talking with my friends that day or that week. I like to talk, I like to ramble, so, why not put it into a show, put it into this type of content, and put it out to the world to see and to listen to. So, like I said, thank you guys for consuming however you're consuming. Wanted to use this episode as just an intro to me. Some of you may know who I am. I know a lot of you don't. So, yeah, this is going to be intro. Like I said, the intro to me. So I'm just going to run down, where I'm from. Basically, how I think in certain ways with, what I've consumed over the years, which, I'll basically be talking about the music and, the media I consumed over the years, which shaped me into who I am, and, the people that have shaped me into who I am. So, let's get started. I'm from Jersey. I grew up in Union with, me and my sister grew up in Jersey, in Union, with my aunt and uncle. Basically we lived with them, up until around, high school, and then of course went on to do things with our lives as adults. So, I grew up, like I said, in Union. Growing up in Union was cool. It was a nice neighborhood, I grew up in a cul-de-sac, so it was a lot of people like me, as in, kids my age. We shared similar interests. Some kids, there was, when you're growing up, there was different middle schools within Union. So I went to Washington. I had kids that went to Livingston Elementary, Burnett. Burnett was a middle school. I can't remember all the elementaries that we had, but different elementary schools. So I was the only one that really went to Washington. Well, me and my cousin, who lived across the street from me. Shout out to him. But living in the neighborhood was pretty cool. We would go outside every day. This was, before I was really into the internet and had a phone or was into social media. I was outside. I know it's foreign for some of you guys, but, being outside was a thing. You would play, tag, ride bikes. We had, kickball, little tournaments going on outside. It was a pretty good time back then. But yeah, just playing outside was cool. And then, while I was inside, I was basically into a lot of cartoons and movies and, TV shows. I wasn't really into, listening to music yet. I would hear things on the radio as, my aunt would, take me to school sometimes. But, really the TV shows, as a kid, I was watching Courage the Cowardly Dog. I was watching Avatar: The Last Airbender, Johnny Bravo. Just, it was a combination of Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon. So, it was more Cartoon Network than Nickelodeon, but, there was things on Nickelodeon. Of course, SpongeBob, Danny Phantom, those things caught my attention. I was, watching that. Cole Lyoko was another show on Cartoon Network. I was watching. I was watching some anime. I would go over to my cousin's house. He was more of the anime guy. Him and his older brothers watching Toonami, um, with Dragon Ball Z and Bleach and Naruto. Which I ended up. I would watch Naruto was one of my favorites, but Dragon Ball Z I ended up being into that much later. But yeah, I was just a simple kid watching, cartoons. I also was into cartoon movies like Tarzan. Tarzan was one of my favorites. Bugs Life, and watching those movies. Actually, thinking about it got me into more of the music because of the music behind those movies. Like Randy Newman uh, did well, I was into Toy Story as well, and Randy Newman did the soundtrack to Toy Story, and he did the soundtrack to Bugs Life. And I was interested in the songs because they sounded good, but also his voice was very distinct, and it was interesting. And it could turn some people off, which I can understand, but to me, I liked it. With Tarzan, Phil Collins, who was dope in his own right, but that was my first time hearing Phil Collins. Then later on, discovering uh, some of his songs through the radio, um, Filled in the Air, you found out that's by Phil Collins. I'm like, oh, okay, that's the guy that did the Tarzan soundtrack also did this dope song, and that also got me into the connections of music and artists doing different things of media, and then finding out about the songs that they did before. So that was dope. But yeah, but my music discoveries really came from my sister. My sister was she had the iTunes, the iPod. She would be on the computer and downloading music from her iPod. I didn't have an iPod. I had like it was a MP3 player with a USB stick at the end. Um, she had earned the money to get the iPod, and I was happy with my MP3 player stick. But really, I didn't really know how to work the internet as well. So when I plugged it in, I only downloaded a few songs. Um, I remember Tupac. So Many Tears was a song. DJ Unk, which definitely came from my sister. Chris Brown, Jordan Sparks, No Air, of course, came from my sister. All three of those songs came from my sister. I was basically copying her, whatever she had, and later on when I found out, just exploring the internet more, finding out how to put my own music on there. I was like, okay, I don't have to siphon off my sister all the time. So that's where I discovered albums like Illmatic and Me Against the World, Ready to Die, um, Graduation, Late Registration. All these albums that I would hear the songs singularly by themselves, either on the radio or on a TV show, and I would listen to the whole bodies of work. And that's what got me interested really into music is, well, into listening to albums was, you know, downloading them from, the internet and putting them on my MP3 flash drive. And yeah, I'm just like, yeah, these guys is dope. Nas, Tupac, Big, Kanye is like, yeah, I love this. I love, and it was different styles in the same genre. And, Tupac was more of a emotional guy, but also aggressive. And, Big was just straight aggressive, but had storytelling. And, Kanye um, was like himself and being real, and he wasn't like the gangster of Big and Pac, but you know he was himself, which I appreciated. And listening to that, as I got older, it's like, okay, I can appreciate this more because he was being himself, and being confident in himself to put that out there. And just listening to that was just great. And then getting into middle school, you know, uh, you're influenced by the kids around you listening to stuff, and that's when guys like Kid Cudi came around and Drake, and I was listening to those guys. And which Drake came out of nowhere for me, was best I ever had, which didn't really draw me in. It was like, okay, this is a cool song, but he had other songs like Fear that it was like, oh yeah, this is dope. Um, but no, Kid Cudi was definitely my guy. Listening to the Man on the Moon mixtape, then the Man on the Moon album that came out, and it's like, yeah, this guy is way different than from what I was listening to before. It was like he was rapping, but it was also like a singing type of harmony to what he was doing, and that was, like I said, it was different, and I liked it. I liked guys that were different doing their own thing, and it was catchy as well. So I became a big Kid Cudi fan off of the Man on the Moon, like I said, the mixtape and the album. Getting into middle school, into high school, that's where I started using the internet even more. Which I wasn't on social media yet, but I was on YouTube, which I was on YouTube before, but I was looking up like anime clips and things like that. But now I was looking into full albums, and I also got into music reviews, and got into what people thought of certain things, which is how I discovered Dead End Hip Hop. It's a hip hop channel, obviously, Dead End Hip Hop, but just watching their reviews, and them reviewing people I never heard of, like who is Rock Marciano, or who is Elzai, and who's Killer Mike, and them reviewing that, and then I will listen to it, and it's like, okay, no one around me is mentioning or listening to this guy, so yeah, this makes it even cooler that I'm into these guys. And they were just dope, not just because they were different, but you know they could rap actually. And yeah, also I was watching Anthony Fantano. He was interesting in the way he reviewed music and broke it down. And then with the internet, also your friends are on the internet as well, so they're into stuff that you may not have uh discovered yourself, but having conversations with them, it's like, okay, uh you're listening to that, and then I'm listening to this, oh, who's Kendrick Lamar, or what is Odd Future, and them putting me on to ASAP Rocky, and it's like, okay, yeah, these guys is like coming up, and it's like, yeah, it's just like I said, I'm into different things, so they were doing different things. I'm like, okay, yeah, these is great guys, especially Odd Future. I was a really big Odd Future fan. Tyler, Frank, Haji Beats, Earl. He wasn't when I was listening to Odd Future. Earl had went away, so I wasn't into Earl yet until he had came back. It was like, okay, who is this Earl guy? I wasn't really into him until he came back, and it's like, oh, the Free Earl campaign. I remember one of my friends had the shirt, and then I remember Yonkers had dropped, and the Odd Future tapes, and I was listening to these guys, and Frank had Nostalgia Ultra, which, man, that was like a big discovery for me in terms of, because I was never like the big R&B dude, and of course there was R&B people in the past that I was interested in. I liked I liked Rihanna, I liked Beyonce, but it wasn't really like what I was into. Like when Frank Ocean had came out, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm into this. Like this is like my type of R&B. Also, I'm forgetting Childish Gambino. I was also put on to Childish Gambino by actually he wasn't really a friend, but he was someone in class that I had class with, and he was like a grade higher than me, and he was listening to the Camp album, and I was listening to that, and I was like, oh yeah, this guy is interesting. He's like some of the bars was like, okay, it's kind of like off kilter, but like I said, I like different things. So he was, and also he was like a nerd, so I was into nerd things, so I was interested, and yeah, I became a big Childish Gambino fan at the time, along with the guys I mentioned before, I Future, all of them, Kendrick, ASAP Rocky, and yeah, just listening to those guys, and then discovering people that listen to those guys, and you forming friendships around this music. Um, was part of my high school experience, and I wouldn't have it any other way, to be honest. But yeah, moving on into college, and I had took a music course in college, and that's how I got more into jazz, which with John Coltrane, Thelonious Monk, and Miles Davis. These guys were eccentric in the way they you know was doing jazz music, and it's like, yeah, this was I've been saying different a lot in this episode, but I like the different things they were doing, and also really got big into MF Doom. I remember listening to what was that, Mad Villainy, which I don't know, even remember how exactly I got put on to MF Doom. I was seeing him before in high school and things like that, like the image of like a dude in a mask, but it wasn't really like what I was interested in. I was on to I was into what I was into, and I didn't really have much room yet for other things. But when I got into college, I think I just randomly was listening to Mad Villainy, and then yeah, MF Doom and Madlib, the way Madlib constructed these beats around the rhymes of MF Doom, and he created this landscape of like this weird and different world, and I was a fan of that. And coming to find out, my friends was also MF Doom fans. It's like, damn, why you never put me onto this? Like, this is like crazy and dope. And then like, I didn't think you'd be into it. Like, bro, I'm into different things, but we was all busy with the artists. Like, hip hop and rap is like a huge genre. Um, I was kind of like anti mainstream a little bit, which is why I kind of backed off of like Lil Wayne. I remember Lil Wayne in middle school was like really popping, and it's not that I didn't think he was dope. Well, I didn't think he was dope. I'll say I didn't think he was dope, Wayne, but I did appreciate him more as I got older. But I was trying to uplift the quote unquote underground guys at the time, over Lil Wayne. The whole Young Money, Cash Money, they took over basically my whole high school, experience on the radio. On the radio, it was Wayne, Nicki, Drake, Wayne, Nicki, Drake. That was all through middle school and high school. Was those guys on the radio? So salute to that era. There was it was cool. Um, but yeah, just going back to my college experience, listening to MF Doom is like, yeah, this guy is and it he's eccentric. He's something that even the way he rhymed, he would like rhyme about, a character, and then he would, stop a rhyme and then rhyme it with something that didn't rhyme, and it's like, if anybody else did that, it'd be called like, okay, that's kind of whack. But the way he did it was dope. Rest in peace, MF Doom. Of course, I was devastated when he died. Of course, but yeah, outside of MF Doom, I also was going back to older artists like Stevie Wonder and Marvin Gaye and Michael Jackson, which we all heard Michael Jackson as kids, but I wasn't listening to Michael Jackson albums. It wasn't until college. I was listening to Thriller and Bad and Off the Wall. All these you know Michael Jackson albums where I didn't listen to necessarily as a kid, because like I was saying before, I was always into my own thing, and wasn't making much room for anything else. But just like, okay, yeah, this guy, he's one of the greatest of all time. And while listening to these older guys and listening to music, I was also consuming other forms of media, which was this was around 2015, 2016 is when I got into podcasts. And I was a big Brilliant Idiots fan, and fan of Combat Jack and Taxis, and listening to these different podcasts, which at first was kind of weird, but they were entertaining at the same time. Because it's like, okay, you're listening to a dude talk for an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, but whoever, it depends on who's behind the mic. And I remember Combat Jack, he would have interviews with certain people. It's like, okay, I like this. Tax Season was the same thing, which Tax Season was his own personality, and whoever he was interviewing was, it didn't matter who he was interviewing. It was an entertaining episode. But yeah, was really big into Brilliant Idiots. That's what really started, my podcast journey, which me and my friends, that's how we started our podcast journey, I'll say, which which formed into Mentis, the origins of Mentis, and who came up with the name, which I came up with the name. Yes, thank you, thank you, thank you. Mentis. Some of you may have heard of it. You know, Others definitely have heard of it because yeah, was stealing our shit back in the day. But Mentis was, well, still is. That's what we call ourselves. It was an acronym for all our names. Um, but yeah, it was Matt. I was Eric. Um, cousin Irie. My boy Tigo, and S was for Shakespeare / Saint. Pardon the interruption, but I would like to say I totally forgot the I in Mentis. I don't know what I was thinking, but the I is for Izzy, probably the most important member of our group. Uh, if you listen to this, watching this, Izzy, I'm sorry, man. I'm sorry. All that formed into what became Mentis, and we started doing our own podcasts. Yeah, those were just really good times. But it did. As life goes on, you start to, okay, now I have to start actually getting a job and working, and school was graduating. Well, I never graduated college. I was a college dropout. But I started working, and everyone else stops working, and the creative process slowed down, and the whole Mentis as a podcast ended around, I would say, like 2019. I don't remember exactly. Probably probably around the pandemic for sure, 2020. Um, that's when everyone was isolated, doing their own thing, some people trying to survive. Um, but yeah, that's where, I would definitely blame myself as well. Um, I stopped, being creative. I just, became a consumer and just, started working. And I guess now this is my stepping my foot out back into creating, um, which, I never want to stop creating ever again. I'm never going to stop. And, hopefully, me putting this out and someone listening to this, watching this, um, just know that it's never too late to go back into creating. It's never too late to start creating. I encourage everyone to do some form of creation, um, to form your own thing, or with people that are like minded. It's always good to have your own thing. You never want to keep working for someone else, and even if the creative thing leads you into different avenues, as long as you say, I had this idea, I put it out there, and whoever watches it watches it. As long as it's out there, you know that's what we were doing with Mentis, and with the whole skits. We didn't really care who was watching it. We just put it out there for fun. And I want to I'm getting back into that for sure. So it's never too late to start creating. uh Never stop creating. It's not too late for you, it's not too late for me. I know it's my time, it's your time, it's just everyone's time to just do something and put it out there for the world to see. So that's really my message at the end of this is, do what you want, do what you can, and never stop. So, but yeah, that's just winding down. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. I appreciate anyone that gives us a listen, gives us a watch. Like I was saying before, comment, like, do anything you can to spread this throughout all the avenues of the internet, because I want this seen and watched as much as possible, so I can keep on doing this. Which even if nobody watches, I'm still gonna do this shit. I'm still gonna put it out. I'm still gonna keep on, like I said, creating. Which I want this to be not just even like video or listening format. I want to do skits. I have a lot of ideas, and I want to put them out there. So yeah, this is the what, and thank you. See you next time.